little goodies.
We are recording.
Okay. If you do not have the supplies to do canning, you will need, this is a water bath pot. You have a rack that goes in it. This is a jar lift that when your jars are hot, you can pick them up out of your pot. I normally use the rack to pick mine up. Or actually, Ray uses the rack because I can't get it by myself. There's different ways of canning different things. If you're planning on canning meat, you need a pressure canner. I have never canned meat. I have no idea how to do it. I know it has been done. My grandmother has done it. And for me, it was not the thing. I mostly do vegetables. One of the things I want to say is, think about this. Why do I want to can? You don't have to answer me. That's for you to answer. As far as that goes, the product is normally better than what you buy out the store, taste-wise. And it'll last on your shelves 4 to 5 years if it's taken care of properly. Do I have the supplies to can? If you don't have these supplies, it's going to cost you to get started. These jars are not cheap. These are not cheap. By the time you get all the supplies together, you've got a good bit of money involved. The other one, do I have storage space for my canned goods once I get them canned? Mm-hmm. They need to be stored in a dark area. Preferably somewhat cool where it doesn't get baking hot on them. Ray recommended that you could store them under your bed if you had a way to slide a box under your bed or whatever. Ooh. Or maybe put some bookshelves in a spare closet and store them on the bookshelves.
Down in a storm cellar?
Most places here don't have a storm cellar.
That's kind of cool.
But most places, if you live in an apartment or one of the newer houses here, you're not going to have that space unless you create it. A spare bedroom with bookshelves around the wall is a good spot. But you don't want to put them out in a metal building outside, because if you do, the heat is going to get to them. I know my aunt lived in Georgia. She had a dugout place in her backyard that was probably 10 by 12 that was actually supposed to be a smokehouse. It was about 4 foot deep in the ground with a wall around it, and that's where she stored her goods. But not everybody has that access.
Under a trailer in a box?
Huh?
Under a mobile home in a box?
It's
If it's a metal box, if it's pushed under a house?
I don't recommend that. I really don't, because the temperature can get pretty hot under that mobile home. And, you know, that's the one thing you don't want: extremely hot temperatures. You don't want, the cold temperature is not going to bother you that much, but the extremely hot will cause your product to lose color, maybe lose flavor.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
What would be like the highest temperature comfortably?
80 to maybe 90, and temperatures like we're having right now is almost too hot to store anything outside. You know, I've got a metal building, but I would not store my vegetables out there. You know, it's just, I wouldn't recommend it. The other thing is, other than space, do I have access to the produce? And I'm going to tell you, if you have to buy your produce, it almost is not worth it. I was looking up today to see what I could find out about the cost of a bushel of peas and beans online. This was in 2021. Field peas, if you got a bushel and they shelled them for you, it was $45. If you bought a bushel and you shelled them, it was $35. Now the yield that you're going to get out of that bushel when you can them is going to be 5 to 7 jars. Depending upon the product, you may get 10. Green beans will yield a little bit more because you don't have as much waste. Green beans would probably yield you about 12 to 15 jars. Maybe a little bit more depending on, and I like to put my jars, pack them up to right here, right in this area. Leave about 3/4 of an inch or so space. And the other thing you're going to have to think about, is it worth my time to do it? It is time consuming. It is work. And you're going to get tired doing it. Tomatoes is probably one of the best, money-wise, to buy and can. And I go to a U-Pick farm. That's where this information, Jackson Farms, that's usually where I go. You can get a 25-pound box of tomatoes for $10, or you can pick a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket for $10. The 25-pound box is equal to about one half bushel. It's equal to about a half a bushel. A bushel of tomatoes averages anywhere from 50 to 55 pounds, depending upon the fruit. How big, how small, you know, how much space it takes up when you're putting it in the basket. You would average about $15 a bushel on tomatoes, but they are going to turn out better. You're going to get, I think it's 12 to 15 jars for a bushel of tomatoes, which is better than 5 to 10 or whatever jars of peas. That's the things you need to consider before you go try to get a bunch of fruit. If you're having to buy it, I don't think it's worth it. Now, if you got a place you can grow it, or if somebody gives it to you, that's a whole different story. A lot of my stuff is fruit that I can. I have a friend that has a pear tree that she doesn't like the pears that's on it because they're the real hard ones. I get those and we can them. Every year she lets me get pears. And I make spice pears. I put up pear halves. I do pears for making pies with and things like that. I put some in the freezer. I put some in jars. We have wild blueberries that grow on our place. Ray picks them. I wash them. I can them. This is one of my products. I did this yesterday. I recommend that you have label and permanent marker so that you can label and date your fruit or vegetables. The other thing is Mexico spaghetti sauce is in a mason jar. Now I throw this lid away that comes on it and substitute my regular jar ring stuff for it. These things, the tomatoes and this, are easy to do. Tomatoes, I cut them. Actually, you need to peel them. And the best way to peel them, have you ever heard of dropping tomatoes in a hot water bath?
Blanch them.
And the skin pulls right off?
Is that blanching?
Blanch your tomatoes. It's not quite, it's just before a rolling boil. It's not really boiling, but it's good and hot. Drop them in for a few minutes, take them out. The skin will almost come off in your fingers. I like to quarter my tomatoes, depending on how big they are. If they're real big, I do more than quarter them. And I stuff them in the jar as tight as I can get them. Just as many as I can get. and put the lid on them. Then I put them in my pot, which holds 7 jars in the little wire basket. There's a space that you can put 7 jars in there. Get the water boiling. I put water in the pot up to here on the jars. After I put the jars in, I put water up to
Gennie,
the
Can I ask a
up to
question?
the lid almost. Make sure you put your lids on good and snug, because if you don't, your juice is going to boil out of your tomatoes.
Gennie, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you were saying that for the economic value, sometimes it's better to just buy canned. But do you have any idea of what the nutritional value might be different between canning? Because I hear that canning can take a lot of the vitamins and stuff, the nutrients out of something.
You mean my canning?
No. I mean like buying them in a can from the store.
Actually, it shouldn't.
Okay.
It shouldn't. Handled and done properly and everything, they should have the same nutrients. The one thing you don't do is don't throw away the juice that was canned in. That's where you lose your vitamins. And I'll talk to you about that in a few minutes.
Okay.
These, I cook my berries. I have a recipe for this if anybody wants it. I cook them. I have my jar clean, sitting there. When they're to the stage that I think they're ready, I pour them into the jar, put the lid on it, tighten it down good, set them on the counter. They'll seal themselves. You don't have to water bath them. You don't have to water bath your jellies or your jams. You put them in the jar while they're hot. And they will, steaming hot, right out of the pot, off the heat. They will seal themselves. Are you familiar with this?
That's called pectin.
I haven't used it, but I'm
Pectin.
familiar with it.
Have you ever seen it? Bought it?
No, I've never made jams and jellies. I've only ever canned bone broth. So
Guess
far.
what? It's a white powder.
Okay.
I'm not going to open that. It comes with instructions of how to do it. It tells you how much fruit, how much water. It tells you how to make freezer jams and jellies. It tells you how to make cooked jams and jellies. When you're going to make it, just be sure you're looking at the right directions and you follow the directions. So this is no big deal. This is something that anybody can do if they can read and follow directions. And again, if you don't have the fruit and you're having to buy the fruit, you might want to think twice. It takes quite a bit of sugar to do these things. And that's another expense you will have with canning.
Sugar is about $3 for a 4-pound bag now.
Yeah, well, I don't buy 4-pound bags.
Would we spend $30 on a 50-pound bag?
Yeah.
That's what we buy it by the 50
Well, I
pound
wouldn't buy it and it was out, so.
at Sam's Club.
Oh,
And in fact, if there's anything in a big bag at Sam's Club, we try to buy the big bag
Yeah.
because I do
You needing sugar?
jellies.
not anymore. I'm no longer a beekeeper.
I do jellies, I do preserves, I do pepper relish, and all of that requires sugar. Now I cheat a little bit and I use a little Splenda in mine to cut back the sugar because I need less sugar.
Right.
But now if you cut back the sugar, you've got to adjust your time of cooking or it will not gel. And sometimes I make syrup when I'm trying to make jelly. But you know what? It's good on hot cakes. But anyway,
You
that's
can
it.
add a little yeast and some water and make wine too.
No, thank you. I don't need to do that right now.
Okay.
But I do recommend you have a roll of labels and an indelible marker to mark your product so you know what it is and when you put it up. And like any other thing, you rotate them on the shelf. When you're canning, funnels. Different jars sometimes have different size mouths for openings, and you have to watch what you're doing, but you put your funnel and pour your fruit in there. That way it's less mess. It's still a mess. I like to take a sheet pan and I line it with a paper towel, set my jars there, and then hopefully I can roll up that paper towel and my sheet pan's still clean.
There you go.
I try to do that. It don't always happen, but that does help cut down on some of the mess.
Can you can with a pressure cooker? We got one of those little Instapots.
No. No. This, for vegetables, your peas, your beans, your squash, your grandmother even put up soup mix. She would mix corn, peas, beans, and stuff together with tomatoes and would can her own soup mix.
So is it that the Instant Pot doesn't get hot enough, or what is it?
The pressure control isn't the same as a pressure canner control.
Pressure cooking raises
It
the
won't reach-
temperature to a higher level.
Yeah, a pressure canner goes way higher than
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
an Instant Pot.
I cook my tomatoes once they start rolling for 1 hour. Turn the fire off, holler at Ray, he comes lifts the rack out for me.
Good job,
Yeah.
Ray.
Yeah. And I try to do that whenever he's somewhere close around where he can be there to help me. I have one recipe written down here on the when you do your blueberry pie filling, I'm gonna be honest, you can use it for blueberry jam or blueberry pie. I used it in my blueberry delight that I made. That was what was on that.
That was good.
And if you have trouble with that, you just get back with me and let me know.
And we can probably type up your recipes and have them available online.
And you know, next year the Shemitah, hopefully have enough blueberries to distribute to the members of the congregation, and I want to try and produce stuff for the congregation as
Oh,
much as
that'd be
I can.
awesome.
This jar takes 4 cups of blueberries, a cup of sugar, a cup of water, 4 tablespoons of cornstarch, and 2 teaspoons of lime or lemon juice. It calls for lemon juice. I use lime and lemon interchangeably because they basically are the same thing.
I have a Myers lemon tree in my yard, so I'll be using that.
Kind of like it. I had a little bit left over out of that, about that much in a little jar that we're eating on toast right now for jam. But it made a little bit more than the quart size.
Is the cornstarch a thickening agent?
Yes. Now when you're canning your vegetables, I didn't mention this because I don't do it. Some people like to put a teaspoon of salt in their vegetables when they can them. It's just an extra preservative. Doesn't have to use it if you don't want to. I choose not to. That's just my choice. I season my stuff whenever I take
Do
it
you
out.
use vinegar in the jars too to help, or?
No, not for my vegetables. Peppers. How many do y'all like the hot pepper sauce made with hot peppers and vinegar that you pour over your
Like
greens?
Tabasco?
You could. A lot of people like that pepper sauce to pour it over their green vegetables when they're eating them sometimes, like turnip and mustard greens and stuff. You can take your peppers, clean them. You don't have to stem them. Just wash them real good. Pack them in that jar tight as you can. Boil you some vinegar on the stove and pour it into that jar on top of those peppers while it's boiling. Put your lid on it. You got a hot pepper sauce. And let it set for a little bit. And it will get hot and be good on your greens and stuff. I make a spicy, sweet and spicy pepper relish. You've tasted of my relish, haven't you?
Yeah, it's good.
You like it?
It's really good. Thank you.
That's real easy to make. The worst part about that is your hot peppers. You need to wear gloves when you're working with them. And I strip the veins and the seeds and everything out of the hot peppers.
Have
And
you
then I-
noticed? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you need
Have you noticed it being harder to find the pickling salt?
pickling.
Yeah, on here you wrote pickling salt for this recipe. Where do you find that?
You get it at the pig.
Come talk to me.
Right here.
Pickling, yeah. You
This
can
one.
get it at Walmart
The
or the
pickling salt.
yeah. You can get
Walmart's
it.
always out though. Do you know anywhere else
The
that
pig
Oh.
right over here.
Oh,
You can get it at Pig. You can get it at Walmart. I think I got mine from Walmart.
The Ziggy Piggy?
Piggly Wiggly
And
Express down the
the
road.
pickling salt is different than your table salt. It does not have the iodine in it. Iodine will discolor your product. So that's why you have pickling salt. And anybody that makes pickles, the dill pickles that have salt in them,
They have lime, salt, and everything at the pig. They do canning stuff.
yes, they carry the canning stuff. Walmart carries it. Ace Hardware in Lynn Haven carries canning supplies.
Yeah, I got a bunch there.
There's several places. Now, your rings, don't throw your cannon rings away. And when I put up fruit, I do not throw the lids away. I wash them and reuse them. If I put up anything with vinegar or tomato or anything like that in it, I do not reuse the lids because the acid can damage the lids.
Have you ever tried putting a coat of beeswax in the bottom of the?
I don't use beeswax. I'm sorry, that's just a little
Okay.
extra,
Okay.
and it's not necessarily that you have it. It's just an extra thing that you would have to buy if you did it. And like I said, sometimes extra is not necessary. But your lids have a coating here, and sometimes the coating can get damaged by the acid in the vinegar or the tomatoes or something like that. And that's why I don't reuse these lids. And that's why I throw these away, because they're one piece, lids. So I use a fresh lid when I'm doing tomatoes. I put my lids in a pot of hot water when I'm working with them. I use a pair of tongs to take them out and put them in the jar. The hot water sterilizes the lids. I don't use clean dishwashing. When I was growing up, my job was to dishwash. I washed more fruit jars than you can imagine, because my aunts and my mom used to all get together and can, and my first cousin and I were the jar washers.
You were kids, weren't you, at the time?
Oh, in my teens.
I say, if your kids get those little hands in there with the scrubber
Yeah,
and
I
really,
didn't have the big hands that I have now, but yeah, they used us to do the jar washing while they did the other work. So that's what I grew up doing, basically. And then I got old enough to start working with the other stuff. Somebody else got the dishwashing job, jar washing. But
you don't need to sterilize if you can go bath them or can them hot.
if you got them clean and you're gonna hot water bath them,
Takes care of it.
it takes care of it. And you don't have to pre-cook your product unless you're making tomato sauce. If you want a canned tomato sauce, you would have to pre-cook it and make your sauce. But I prefer to can my tomatoes, and then I can take them and make my sauce from them afterwards when I open them. I use my canned tomatoes for chili, soups, tomato gravy, just about anything that you would use a tomato for except for eating it fresh. And if you wanted to throw it in the blender and blend it up, you could make juice. That's up to you. You know, it's already cooked. Because when you boil it for an hour in that pot, it's cooked. Anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Now, now what's it? You can on the blueberries. How long do you usually have to cook the blueberries before you drop them in the can? Usually.
These, when you put the cornstarch in them, it leaves a milky looking consistency in the liquid.
Uh-huh.
When that cooks out to where it's no longer milky looking,
Okay.
and the juice is thick enough that when I take the spoon up and I can tell that it's not water, I put them in here and put the lid on them. That's all there is to it.
Well, if I get a lot of blueberries, I'm gonna bring some to you. I'm gonna try to can some, make wine out of some, and
You do that, you're gonna be there with me, and I'm gonna show you how to do it, and you're gonna do it.
Oh, you're gonna call me so I can join you. Because I want to do that.
But it's easy. It's not that hard. The biggest thing is having your product make it clean. Make your jars clean. And use a clean process.
I have a question.
What?
So let's say things are such that you really can't find the lids or any of that stuff anymore and they're just not available. Could you take like wax paper and reline those lids and can with them, or is there something else you can do to reuse them? Because you said there were some you didn't want to reuse because it might
When I
damage
put
it.
them on acid foods, like tomatoes and things like that, on my fruits, I can reuse them. Let me put it this way. Don't throw your rings away. The lids, every time Ray goes in a store, if I'm not careful, he comes back with a pack of lids because he knows I will use them. When you see a pack, buy it.
okay.
What was it? Was it last year or 2 years ago I couldn't find them?
2 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. You could not find these anywhere.
Right.
So hoard them if you can.
So if you have 2 or 3 packs and you got a place to put them, keep them.
Well, that's why I was asking if you know, like I said, if you do something that's like the tomato sauce and you want to reuse the lid, can
I
you
don't
do something to
recommend
you can't like line it with
No,
wax
you don't
paper
want to
or
line it with anything
okay.
because that acid will eat through some of that stuff.
I'd like to make a comment on some of that. If you go back even further, like my grandmother did, they did not have these neat sealing lids. They had 2 kinds. One of them was a big old lid with a rain insert and a rubber washer around it. But usually what they would do with other things is after they put it in the jar, they would pour molten wax on top of it when it hardened. Now it's not as robust as that. You're bumping around enough that will break it or cold. You know, the wax itself. But otherwise, that makes a wonderful seal. It's airtight, watertight.
So you would melt wax on top of the lid.
Now, paraffin.
Ah, very
Not
okay.
on the lid. You
Don't put it on the
pour
lid.
directly on the
You put it-
inside
Product.
the
Oh, on the inside. Ah,
But see,
gotcha.
And also, one other thing you should know, Ball and the people that make these lids recommend you use them one time period.
Keeps return
That's because
customers
they
for
want-
the
that's
yeah.
because they want to keep selling them.
Right.
We use them until they are no longer sealed, or they show us all the rust
If
on
you
the
see,
inside, then they're gone.
a problem,
But you can also buy on the internet, I don't know if anybody's locally that sells it, but on the internet you can buy lids that are designed to work multiple times.
if this rubber,
Multi-use lids.
there's a rubber ring
Yeah.
that's breached in any way, that lid will not seal. And if you listen, you'll hear that pop when your product seals. For some reason, if you don't think it's sealed and you touch that, if it seals when you touch it, it's okay. But if it pops back up, I stick the product in the refrigerator and I use it within the next couple of days. I don't throw it out. Just because that lid didn't work, but I make sure I throw that lid away.
Well,
Because
this is what
sometimes
you
you'll
can-
get one that for some crazy reason, they don't seal.
I was saying, that's when she's canning originally, it's not when you go pick it off the shelf, and oh, it's not down.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you don't trust the food.
That's the same day I put it up, that
Right.
if it doesn't seal, I check all of them before I put them on the shelf. While they're still sitting on the table cooling, I make sure that every one of them is sealed before I put it in my cabinets.
And one thing, if you need it because you don't have enough rings, once they're sealed, you can take the ring off. Just try not to get that
Yeah, as long as you
lid or
don't
something.
pop this off, you can take the rings off and reuse the rings on another jar. My grandmother and mother have done that many times. I tend not to do it because right now I've got plenty of rings and stuff.
Try to make sure we have plenty.
But Ray makes sure I have plenty of stuff to use.
So what is that sure gel made of? That sure gel? What is that made of? What is
Pectin.
it's fruit pectin.
Oh, it's fruit pectin.
You can buy the liquid fruit pectin and use that, or you can use the powder. Now, if you're using this, follow directions on it. I will tell you this, if you're using cornstarch to thicken your stuff with, like I do on this, thoroughly combine it with your sugar before you put it in your pot. The reason for that is cornstarch will lump, and if you combine that with your sugar real well, it will not lump. I don't know, did you know that?
No, I didn't. That's good to know.
That's something I just found out recently.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
I go on the internet, I look up things if I'm not sure how to do it, and I don't look at one site. I go to 2 or 3 and I compare what they're saying, and I choose the one that I feel is the best. Not everybody on the internet, I don't feel like everybody has the right information all the time.
Right.
I have the ball blue canning book. It's like a thin little magazine type of book.
Yeah.
And they've been making it for years and years, and pretty much all their recipes are really trustworthy, and that's where I normally look first to see if it's in there.
I have a little book that I got years ago. In fact, the date on it is 1979 when it was published. And that's when I was first doing a lot of this kind of stuff. It's good. It's got preserves for all kinds of fruit and everything in it.
What's it called? Do you remember what it's called?
I can't remember. I'll have to bring it and let you look at it.
So you've been canning for over 40 years.
Probably more than 50 years.
More than 50 years. Wow.
Thank you for the compliment, though. I'll take the 40. If you go to canned corn, if you want to can it on your cob, you blanch it in hot water for a few minutes, take it out, put it in ice water to stop the cooking process, and then put it in your bag and freeze it. And I use Ziploc bags for that. You can cut your corn off the cob if you want to do it with cream corn. You would do it basically the same way you do your other vegetables, with a 1 hour hot water bath. Haven't canned corn in a long time, and the last time I froze it, which I blanched it, cut it off the cob to make cream corn, or either froze it on the cob, depending on what I was wanting to do at that time. And if you have a freezer and you can do that, again, with your freezer bags, date and name your product, because that dating is important. Corn and stuff in the freezer, probably up to a year or maybe a year and a half, depending on how fast you use it. I wouldn't go much over a year and a half on freezer products like that. And I'll be honest, it's almost cheaper to buy a bag of frozen peas or frozen beans than it is to try to buy them and can them. That's just my opinion. In fact, when Bill's strawberry farm was up here, I would go pick strawberries in the summer and put them up.
What happened with?
It's no longer there. I think the old man died and the children took it over and they decided they didn't want to mess with it anymore. But I would pick strawberries in the summer and they got to where they were so expensive for a basket that I just decided it wasn't worth it, because it's a lot of work to haul those berries out and slice them and can them. And so I decided not to do that anymore, and I buy my strawberries from Sam's Club now. Hey.
Do you turn around and can them?
No, I buy them and eat them like they come, frozen. You know.
I'm thinking about planting strawberries next year. I really want to get the blueberry production going. I want to supply the congregation as well. I want to do eventually.
So you got enough land to do both, blueberries and strawberries?
If
Non-commercially, I can. No, I mean for the congregation,
Yeah,
I just
that's
have
what I
to.
meant.
I just have to be able to get my sorry butt working.
No.
if you have enough property to plant some garden, I recommend it.
I am.
I'm serious. I don't know how much yard space you have, but you can take a flower bed and put tomato plants in it. Put your pepper plants in it. Bell pepper, tomatoes are pretty easy grown. And I say that, and this year I've had crappy luck with it. I'm sorry. The weather has not been good or something, and my tomatoes
And
don't
here's
look.
another thing: you can take your kitchen sink and wash machine. You come off with a separate gray water and use that to water your tomatoes, your peppers, and everything. And whenever you wash clothes or wash dishes, you're watering your garden. Just as long as you don't keep your black water.
Well,
You keep your
I'd
black
be
water
careful
in a
about that
septic
too,
tank.
because I'll tell you why. If you use bleach in your laundry, you don't want to put that bleach on your garden.
I don't use bleach.
Yeah, that's very something that, and some people put bleach in their sink to wash dishes with. And the other thing is your product that you put in your dishwasher has a bleach of some type in it.
I mean, we used it before, and it would grow tomato trees, not plants, but trees.
Using your gray water?
Yeah,
Yeah,
as
gray
long as
water.
you don't put products
But,
in
yeah.
it that goes
That can
against it.
adulterate your food.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
When you were talking about taking the corn off of the cob to can it, would you just cram the jar full of the kernels, or would you add any water?
I didn't usually add water to it because it has, when you take have you ever cut corn for cream corn off the cob? Okay, you're not taking the whole kernel. You're shaving the top off of that kernel, then scraping your cob to get the milk out. And that gives you your liquid. And then whenever you go to cook it, you're going to add your butter or whatever to it to cook it, and that gives you a little more liquid there. But no, I wouldn't add water. But you don't can the whole kernel, not that way. I mean, I just barely take the top off of the kernel and then scrape that cob to get all the goodie out of it. knowing how to handle your product is very important. And I don't know anybody else, anything? You've done some.
What have you done?
I've done a couple of jellies, and I've done some soup and some meat. I got into canning, and then that was right before I had to move here, and then kind of, like she was saying about it not being economical, I've been having a hard time finding a good deal on anything to can. Like, all my canning supplies are here with me, but I haven't even canned one thing because I can't find, like, I'm really happy about this farm because I haven't been able to find anything that was a good enough deal to actually buy a few.
We'll pray for next year that we have prosperous enough blueberries where I can share with the congregation.
Hey, what
Because
about
I want to, I want to do supply like for wine, jellies, fillings,
what about making a piece of our land, if you want to call it that, the small part we got? We could make it maybe a community garden. People can, if they want to grow something, they'd get a little plot and be able to grow it on our.
The biggest thing about in town too, because the animals don't have much, is like protecting your fruit if you do fruit. Because like Aunt Jo has plum trees, and they started getting and they're like the little really sweet, amazing plums.
Mhm.
And as soon as they started to turn where you could almost be able to get them, like the next day they were all gone from the birds. And
Wow.
You have to get
literally
wildlife
not even
netting.
one was left.
I
Yeah,
have
use
a
wildlife
big
netting
mulberry
on 'em.
tree in my chicken yard.
Mhm.
I didn't get any mulberries off of it this year.
Yeah, Aunt Jo has a small one too, and they were on there. We picked like 2, the rest weren't right, then they were gone.
And
Well, it's Shemitah this year.
the wind
birds
blew them
deserve
out,
it.
the birds got them, the squirrels got them. You know,
It's amazing how smart animals are, huh?
There's supposed to be little tricks to scare birds away, like little colorful like tassels or like CDs.
it don't always
or something.
work.
Yeah, it may or may not.
Mm.
It's worth
You
a
get
try.
wildlife netting. It's a plastic
Yeah,
netting you can throw over your,
I have seen that.
and that does work.
yeah.
I'd have
I've
to have
seen
a
that
drone to
before.
throw it over my tree.
Well, I'll help you with it if you need to go over a tree. How
I
high
got
is
some
your
pretty
tree?
tall ladders if you want me to bring them out.
But no. Fruit, if you know anybody that has a pear tree or a plum tree and it has a lot of fruit on it, and they're not going to use it, ask them if you can.
Ooh, do you know anything about date palms? 'Cause
We've grown some.
I think we have one for sure, maybe 2 in our yard, and they produce dates. We don't know
What
when
color
to
are they?
harvest them. Like a deep brown, kind of this color.
Probably around
almost
August.
That looks like a dromedary date, kind of.
black. I don't know. They're just
There's the
they're up
orange
high,
kind.
and we don't know when to
The
harvest
orange
them,
kind.
What to do with
You
them.
can make jellies and stuff
As
out
soon
of
as
it.
you see them start dropping, 1 or 2 drop, you can go ahead and
Call
start
you,
pulling.
and then you'll come harvest them.
Okay. So
And we have one orange tree that makes some really sour oranges.
Oh, so sour. But it is the one thing that lasted through the stupid hurricane. It was like, I'm still here.
It's unreal, but that seems to be the thing that will last.
But she was talking about using
Sauerkrauts.
limes and lemons. I mean, it's sour enough to maybe we can
It
use
is.
that.
It's not to make it sour. That's to preserve the color.
Right, I'm just saying maybe we can use the fruit off of that tree and
that might
Put it in.
it's like it's lemon sour, but it's an
Yeah.
orange sized fruit that comes off of it.
And there are lemons that's as big as oranges.
I caught Maya's lemon. We have 2 in front of my room.
And
And
are they round and bright orange? But it's a lemon?
It smells
Not
like an
orange,
orange,
but
but
it's,
it's sour like a lemon.
yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah.
No, ours are orange like
You probably
oranges.
got an orange tree that has died back and has come back from the root, because most orange trees are grafted.
Oh, really?
Yeah, most of your orange trees are grafted to have the fruit that is sweet. I have made
Is grafting biblical? As
Oh yeah, we're grafted.
I understand, but I mean, grafting plants is like, is that considered
I
mixing
think they
seeds
did that with the grapevines
not.
and things like that. So.
It is not.
Okay.
But
Crossbreeding.
here's the thing, that bitter orange, you can try it, but it's going to take an awful lot of sugar. But I made kumquat preserves. That's a lot of work because there's a lot of little seeds in the kumquat that has to come out. But it is absolutely delicious. You can try making like orange marmalade type thing with your orange. You'd have to look on the internet and check your recipes and things like that because I don't have one.
And you know, I think she might be right. Like rhubarb, how bitter rhubarb is by itself, but when you
rhubarb.
add the sugar with it, it really makes a dynamic flavor. Well, yeah, yeah.
And rhubarb is just something that does not grow here well.
I've
Doesn't
tried
get cold
it many
enough.
times.
You'd have to put it in the freezer during the winter time and then replant it to get it to work
For
here.
a week, they say a week or a month or something like that. It has to have that dormant season to come
Right. It has to be frozen almost
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because it gets frozen in the ground where it normally grows.
Yep.
Anybody like asparagus?
I love
Oh, yeah.
sparkle.
I do.
I love it.
You know, that comes back year after year after year.
I got some growing in my backyard near my septic tank.
You can take one of
Nice.
those big pots or what they call a half whiskey barrel
Yeah.
and put you some dirt in it and put you some asparagus in there to grow. You can can that.
That might be good for the bags.
I mean, just some thoughts and
Yeah.
some suggestions. In fact,
I didn't
I
And
wanna-
what I'm using my septic tank leach bed for, I grow the weeds on there and I harvest it and I grind them up into compost. So that's where I get my compost from, indirectly from. Take the weeds, cut them down, and put them in the compost pile.
and you compost them so that the seeds are disposed of and don't come back up.
Right. You see, when I put it in the pile, I'll take some potassium nitrate and pour it on the top of the pile. And that activates the bacteria and helps break it down.
Because if the seeds don't get broken down, then
They
all
turn
you're going
into
to grow is
weeds.
a weed garden. Yep.
That's when we should do that patch.
Don't use horse manure on your garden.
No? Oh,
Don't use what?
Don't use horse manure on your garden.
Oh, sorry.
You
Why
made
not?
that mistake.
Is it too potent?
You grow the most beautiful grass because they do not
They
break
have the
down
seeds.
the seeds.
I like
They
that.
do not.
Chicken manure is the best.
Chicken manure is good, but you have to be careful and not use too much of it, or either let it set and mature before you use it, because fresh chicken manure will burn your garden up.
Well, you shovel in the compost in the chicken coop and let the chickens pick through it, and then they'll add their little recipe to it, and then you can take it.
It grows good tomatoes.
Oh yeah, grows
Yeah,
good. Hemp
We heard
too.
bunnies are the best. Bunny droppings are the best. You don't have to do anything.
Rabbit,
Rabbit droppings.
yep, rabbit droppings are excellent.
Yeah, we've been talking about maybe having a little rabbit farm.
We have all
And
kinds of
Angora,
ideas.
Angora, so Summer can spin the yarn.
Yeah, if we could have bunnies,
I wish
we'd have
rabbit
more
was
of 'em.
kosher.
You know, rabbits multiply like crazy,
Wish they
Yes.
were kosher.
and people buy them. So if you want to have one and sell your rabbits,
But you could always use manure.
Okay, so I've been wondering, with different animal manures, we have a cat, and she produces a lot.
I would not use cat on my
Why do you
garden.
use cat poo? I have so much.
I would not use that on my garden. I'm sorry.
What they eat doesn't. It doesn't do the same thing. It's about what like cows and rabbits. and
Yeah, they're
stuff eat.
carnivorous,
It's the
so-
grass and stuff
Goat.
back out. It's not.
You want herbivores.
Yeah.
She's dry.
Well, chickens are actually omnivores, but Their stuff works okay, but it's very acidic and you have to wait.
Yeah.
Bet you about four
I would say
heads.
the cat would be too acidic
It'd be nice if she was, contributing.
The only thing they contribute is a lap. They want to be on your lap. They're a lap pet.
And they clean up the mice, some of them.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, Zoe doesn't have
I've
front claws.
actually had a cat claw me to death trying to get away from a mouse. I threw it in the bathtub, threw the cat in the bathtub to catch the mouse. And the cat jumped right out of the bathtub, scared to death of that poor little mouse.
Well,
Luck of the Irish.
some cats are nothing but lap pets.
That's a,
Hey, what you doing there?
What? I'm putting
That's-
stuff.
Oh, I thought we were gonna have like a little demonstration. No?
no, she said presentation.
Oh,
not
presentation, not demonstration. Gotcha. Just asking.
These are handy. Sometimes I don't have enough jars to go in this pot, and I have another pot that's almost as deep, but it's not as big around, and maybe 3 jars will fit in it. And I'll put a dishcloth or something in the bottom of it and put the water and the jars in there. I can use this to take them out with because I don't have a rack. I improvise sometimes if I don't quite have the right stuff. And if you know how to do it, it can be done. The reason I put the dish towel in is to keep the jars from bumping together as they're boiling.
That's smart.
Yeah, that's what the rack actually does. It keeps them from bumping together.
Can you stack jars in there? Like if you had smaller jars you were doing?
No. No.
he,
Oh, I thought you could do. stack
If
the-
you're going
the
to can a
smaller ones.
vegetable, you don't want anything much smaller than a pint jar. And literally, I put my pint jars, I put my fruit and stuff in those. And those don't go in the canner. Because they're put in the jar steaming hot,
That's right.
and they seal themselves.
Okay. And how do you fill it with water? Like, say you just had all of your blueberry
Everything
jars in
in here,
there. Yeah, like how much water?
okay, I put my jar in, I put water till it comes up to this area.
Oh, it doesn't have to cover it?
No.
Oh, I thought it had to cover it.
And once it starts boiling, this is not something you put on the stove and walk away from.
Right.
You start it boiling, you time it for an hour. At the hour, you turn it off, you take your jars out. Set them on the counter. If you have an air conditioner, make sure they're not sitting directly under the vent. Or where it's blowing directly on them.
Right.
And if you don't have a choice for that, you can always throw a dish towel over them. Because you want them to cool off, but not cool off too fast.
Right. So what would you say that's like an inch and a half from the top?
When you put your product in there, you can see where the product is right here.
Okay.
You got to have some airspace in there. And that airspace, when the product cools off, that's what pulls that lid down to make it seal.
Oh.
Vacuum.
When the product cools off, that air will pull that lid down.
I remember when I was first trying to learn about it, they had this stick thing with all these little ladder steps, and you needed for this kind of fruit, this much head space, and this much for something else, and so they had
Yeah,
these little
it depends on what you're doing.
things that
The
sit
bulk
on the edge
canning
of the
book
jar.
will tell you, like, you look up what you're trying to can on the recipe and it'll tell you the headspace for each one. But usually, it doesn't matter as much with the water bath as it does with the pressure.
That's
The
right.
pressure canning, if you don't get the headspace correct, it'll explode. Like, it can be dangerous.
Oh,
If you don't do that right, you can blow up your pressure canner and ruin your whole kitchen.
Oh boy.
That's why I don't pressure can.
It's not difficult, you just have to do it right.
You have to be precise about what you're doing with that and watch your pressure gauge and all that stuff.
So basically, anything you can boil, you can self-can because when it cools, it'll create its own vacuum. So any kind of broth, soups.
No,
Yeah.
nothing with meat.
Well, if I was gonna do broth,
Well, like vegetable soup. Those.
Yeah, you might could.
like if I was gonna put broth in a jar, which I don't do, but if I was going to, I would just get it boiling hot on the stove, pour it in my jar, put my lid on, and let it cool off, and it'll seal itself.
You just saved me 3 hours of time then. Thank you.
I'm serious.
Thank you. That sounds wonderful. Because I'll
Because
usually make the broth, but then I don't have time to can it. It's the only thing I've ever canned. And so it'll like sit in the fridge for 3-4 days until I have time to stick it on the stove and can it. Now you're telling me I can just pour it in there and be done with it.
yeah,
Oh man.
just have your jars
Thank
ready.
you.
And like I said, I set up a sheet pan with my jars on it.
Yay.
And you probably need one of these if you. It helps.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And just take your pot and pour your broth in, and
Can it right there. It's ready to
Thank you,
go.
Miss Jenny.
and also, if you happen to get some on the outside around the top of the jar, take a dishcloth and
Right.
clean it.
So after I, do I have to dry it then too?
Dry
like,
what?
Like if I spilled a little and I
Just take a
clean it-
dry cloth.
Oh, just with the dry. Okay.
If it's something sticky like the pie filling, you might want a little damp cloth to wipe it off with to get the sticky off. But yeah, you know, I had one lady that was, she was canning tomatoes.
hmm
She was cooking her tomatoes, putting them in the jar, and then water bathing them again in one of these pots. And I said, "You're wasting a lot of time. You're working yourself to death."
Huh.
She said, "Well, I've never done it any other way."
Yeah.
So I told her what I did, and I don't know if she tried it or not.
So if the product you're working with is like boiling hot, you can can it, cover it, set it aside. You don't have to re-bathe it.
No, that's a waste of time.
And
So
energy.
much time saved right there. Wow.
Yeah. It's the basics of it is really simple. The other thing is just knowing what you're dealing with and how it works.
So I'm not familiar with canning meats, but you can can any kind of meat?
Yes,
And is there a special process for that?
you have to have the pressure cooker. That
Oh.
I do know.
So if you're going to do meat, you have to pressure can meat.
You can put
Yeah.
raw meat straight in a jar, like diced up meat that you're gonna use in a soup later, straight in the jar, and then you just find whatever book you have that says that meat for this amount of time. The pressure canner cooks it, and it'll be sealed and cooked when you take it.
Oh,
Would you put any
nice.
water or seasoning with it?
I think you put water.
Some
Can it-
people
you
would
don't
put a
have to
little
put
salt.
seasoning, but can.
Yeah, I would think salt would be
And you just
A little.
drop the
You don't
lids
wanna
on
put a
top
lot.
of the rings.
Huh?
And you just drop the lids on, no rings. Just drop the lids on it, I guess, and let it cook.
No, no, you gotta have the rings, because when it's cooking, it's gonna boil out if you don't have that ring on there.
Okay, that's
And that's
what
why I said you got to put that ring on good and snug. I mean, not crank it down, but you know, finger tight. Because, well, I'll tell you a story. I had Ray helping me with tomatoes one time, and I was packing the jars, and he was putting the rings and the lids on, and I said, "Honey, snug those down good." Well, he was a little bit afraid of getting them too tight because he was afraid that they needed room to breathe, and it boiled a lot of the juice out of my tomatoes when I boiled them. They sealed. I just didn't have a lot of the juice. A lot of the juice wound up in my pot. But I mean, as far as the product, the product wasn't bad. They just didn't have as much juice in it.
So with the water bath, the headspace, are you saying it's not as important to be as accurate as with pressure canning?
Pressure canning, I think you have to lose a little bit more headspace than pressure canning. But like I said, I don't pressure can, and I'm not going to pretend to know a whole lot about it.
But
Other than
how precise do you have to be for water bathing?
precise, take a look at this jar.
You just have to have enough so when it's hot and expanded, when it cools down, it creates a vacuum under that lid. That's all you really
I
need.
think I need to take
That's
home to
about the
taste it for-
maximum.
I think I need.
That's about the maximum you want to fill a jar.
Okay, so you should not bring it up to this
No,
ring
no.
here.
So did you bring
Really, really good. I would just do it.
did you bring the blueberry pie filling for the class to be able to taste your product and see how good it was?
Well, I was gonna taste
If
that to
you
make sure
got
it's
it-
not poisoned.
At the Yahweh, you got a taste of my blueberry pie.
Oh, it was good. You're talking about
really
the keto
Well,
keto thing,
gluten-free.
the gluten-free blueberry thing.
Gluten-free.
Oh, that was so good. That was so good.
And that crust was almond flour.
I heard good stuff. That was good.
Yep.
Yes, I am.
That's something that I've come across that I really like to use, and I make hot cakes with it.
Yum.
Um,
So, when using almond flour, do you have to use more or less water when you're mixing up your dough, or
no,
it's the same, one for one, just like you would?
I use, for that, I use 2 cups of almond flour, 1 stick of butter, and 1 cup of Splenda because I'm diabetic. Mix all that together, pat it out in my pan. Oh, I did put a couple of tablespoons of cornstarch because that kind of helps it to stick together a little bit. Mix all of it together, pat it out in my pan. I baked it for about 15 or 20 minutes at 350. Took it out, let it cool off, and put my cream cheese filling on top of that,
Oh my
and
goodness.
the blueberries, and
Mm-hmm.
then the Cool Whip.
You know, I don't think I remember exactly how that tastes. Could you do that again, and then I can refresh my memory?
Yeah, I'm the same.
I'm gonna take this home. I want to take this home and test it.
Fine.
Oh,
My memory's getting a little worse since I'm getting older. I think I need a refresher.
I need,
Stop it.
oh me.
So what would you say is the easiest thing to can in a water bath, and what is the most difficult or trickiest?
That's hard to say. Now, I will say that when you're doing things like this and jellies and jams, you got to stay with it. That means be there, stir your pot, you know, it's almost a constant stirring so that it doesn't stick and burn to the bottom. My pepper stuff that I make, I stay there and I stir it so it does not, I may not be standing right over the pot, but I'm right there in that kitchen. And every few minutes I'm up doing a little stir to make sure it's not sticking. And I cook most of my stuff like that on medium heat. I never cook anything on high. Not even once my pot starts boiling good, I turn it down on medium.
So you don't need a rolling boil. You just need it to where it's bubbling.
You need
nice.
just a good even boil, not one of those fast, heavy boils. And when you're making jelly and things like that, you're going to have to follow the instructions and bring it to a rolling boil. You know, but it's, you know, it's not that hard. It's not as hard as some people make it out to be.
I've seen it done, and I've been around it when it was done. I'm interested in canning those blueberries.
Can you share a little bit of some of the prep work for different kinds of produce? I grew up in the city, small town, but still the city. I didn't really prepare any foods for
Okay.
canning ever.
Okay, we'll start with my blueberries. Ray picked 2 different days. When he brought the blueberries in, all I did was put them in a Ziploc and put them in the refrigerator until I had enough to do what I was going to do. Don't wash your blueberries and put them in a plastic bag because it'll make the skin tough. When I get ready to cook them, I take them out, I wash them, I pick all the stems and the leaves and whatever out of them. That's my prep work for that. I told you about the tomatoes where you're gonna blanch them in the hot water to make the skins turn loose, cut them, and the reason I say cut them is you may have a tomato that looks absolutely perfect on the outside, but it will cut into it. You might find where a bug has been. Doesn't mean the whole tomato is bad. You just cut out that part, and this is where a good nose comes in.
Okay.
Smell that tomato. If it doesn't smell like a fresh cut tomato, in the trash.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but a good nose is a cook's best friend. Prep work, it's hard work, but it's easy. I mean, no real hard. Your snap beans and things, I cut the ends of them off, snap them to the size I want them. That's after I wash them. Washing your product is probably one of the more important things. Making sure you don't have any sand and stuff like that on them. Peas and beans, if you're selling them, that makes good compost. The shells of them do. Or I let my chickens compost mine. The chickens and the goats love the scraps that I have left over sometimes.
Sure.
You know, it's not that hard. Main thing is being clean with what you do, having the space to do it, having the stuff you need to do it. If you get started canning and you don't have the products or the stuff, you can't run to the store right then and do it because you're in the process of doing what you need to do unless you have a gopher to go get it for you. That's where people like Ray and Calvin come in handy.
Do you do, well, how do you do your pears? I know they have some seeds in them, they have skin. How do you prep your pears?
Peel them. I usually have a bowl of water, and it's a big bowl, and it has some lemon juice in it. The lemon juice is to help prevent them from turning dark. Apples the same way. Core them. When you go to core something and get the seeds out of the middle, you're going to have to figure out your own way of doing that. Everybody has a different way. But I will tell you this, do you have a melon baller? It's, you know,
I don't think I do. I might. I just don't.
I'm going to be honest with you. That has been the simplest way for me. I cut the product in half, a pear or an apple, take that melon baller and go around and scoop out that core with it.
Oh.
Has been the simplest way to do it. Now,
You use a paring knife too.
that's not as good.
Nope.
That melon baller works wonderful.
Just one swipe and you're done.
Huh?
One swipe and you're done.
Yeah. And it's out on both sides. The pears, depending on whether you want to do halves or sliced pears for making pies or pears for making preserves, what you do to them from that point, you can either put them in the blender and blend them up for making preserves and stuff, or you can cut them up in chunks and cook them, and then I use a potato masher, smash them all up. Either way you want to do that. My pears, I like spiced pears with cinnamon and nutmeg and ginger and sugar on them to make preserves that way. I rarely ever put a thickening agent in my preserves unless for some reason I got too much water in the pot. You have to have a little bit of water to get them started. And I just boil them down until they're tender and just falling apart, and put my spices, my sugar and the stuff in it, and season them to according to what I want them to taste like. And I've never had anybody complain about the flavor of them. You can put a little lime juice or lemon juice in it if you want to when you're doing that, but it's not really necessary, you know. Ray helps me peel the pears. That's the worst part of doing the pears. The worst part of doing your apples is the peeling of them.
I feel like the pear skin is so thin. Could you do a blanching technique with those?
I've never done that, but we have, I don't know what you're using the peel with, but we have those potato peelers where you, and I just
do that.
do that. The pears that I can don't really have thin skins. I don't know what kind of pear you're talking about unless it's these really soft, sweet pear that you buy to eat, you know. The ones I can are they're hard. They're hard but they're good. They're sweet. They make good preserves. They make good pies. And
Do you just compost your peelings?
they go to the critters.
You need
They
to get
do
some
the work.
critters.
Yeah.
They get well fed.
Sounds like it.
But you can compost the peelings if you want to. That's up to you.
If you were gonna do potatoes, would you peel and cube those, or
Depending on the size of it, you would cube it. I would peel it. You can do the water bath with your potatoes. You will need to put water. Once you put your potatoes in your jar, you'll need to put some water in it up to the point that it almost comes up to the top of the fruit, almost covers the potato. The small red potatoes, I would peel them. Your white potatoes, you can cube them up, dice them up. If they're small enough, you can can them whole. I don't know about the cooking time on your Idaho potatoes because they're softer. They may turn to mush if you cook them for an hour. You'll have to look that up yourself and figure out how much time to cook them. Because of their softness, when they are cooked for a certain amount of time, they just will go to mush. There may be a shorter cooking time on that.
And I've also heard of dry canning, like canning dried beans, dried rice, dried.
That's the
homemade
easiest thing in the
soup
world.
mix.
Just sit in the oven and cover it up with the jar.
All you do is put it in the jar. And have you ever heard of diatomaceous earth?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, you know what that purpose of the diatomaceous earth is?
Basically kills off any critters that are alive inside.
You got it. Put your dry product in there, sprinkle a little diatomaceous earth on top of it, put your lid on it. It don't have to be sealed. It don't have to be sealed like your fresh stuff. I'll be honest, we've got 5-gallon buckets with dried beans in them. They don't have anything but a little diatomaceous earth and the lid on them. They'll last a long time that way.
If
Uh,
you do want it sealed though, they have like a thing that like pumps it. So
Right.
It pumps the air out and then it is sealed. Like that's if you want it sealed.
But it's not a necessity.
Like I've seen people make like dry layered soup mixes and mason jars and stuff.
You can do that.
You were saying something about an oven. I saw a video once where a lady dry canned beans.
Well, that's where
in an
he's
oven.
drying his own beans. He's not buying them dried. He's drying his own.
Right.
If you buy
Oh.
also if you buy
You-
bulk rice and beans and stuff, like the huge bags, and you're gonna store it in buckets and stuff, I would freeze it first because there are larvae sometimes and stuff in it. So just
That's why you put the
And then you can
diatomaceous
bring
earth
that,
in there.
then you can put that in the oven up to that temperature, put the top on to kill what's in it, not necessarily destroy the.
But
I found bugs in flour and stuff. It's been saved. It's been saved.
That's how we've been storing our grain.
I've never
We did
had a
that.
problem, and I will tell you this. I am a fanatic. If I have a bag of flour, I will open it and put it in one of these great big pickle jars, glass jar,
Yeah.
and put the lid on it. Never had a problem. Also, I used to buy the mayonnaise in a gallon jar, and I've saved those, and I put my dry flour, cornmeal, and things like that in those. I don't just stick the bag in my cabinet like my mom used to do, and she would get weevils every once in a while. But if you keep them covered up and sealed up like that, I mean, they're not sealed as in preserving seal, but they're sealed so that something can't get into them. You know, they're not going to go bad, and most of your stuff is already treated that you buy now. They radiate it. Yes, they treat it. A lot of your dried products are run through radiation that will kill the larva and things like that.
What else is it doing to it? Shoot.
You'd be surprised what they do to a lot of foods. The one thing I can say about canning your own food, the Food and Drug Administration has declared that there's a certain amount of insects and roach droppings and whatever that can be okay in your store-bought cans. If you're canning your own, you know that it's not having that stuff in it.
Right.
Come get your roach droppings for cheap.
But I'm serious.
I know. You're absolutely right.
If you're doing your own, you can guarantee that it doesn't have any of that stuff in it.
Yep.
And I've heard stories of people opening something and finding dead roaches or dead rats and things like that in their food. That would turn me off really quick.
Real quick.
Yep. I have made apple butter.
You got that recipe?
Up here.
You're coming over my place.
Can
What
it
it-
turn manifest into a jar and appear in my hand outside?
But I didn't have a recipe for it. I made banana butter. When they were bringing bananas and things after the hurricane and people were not taking them, we wound up with a whole case of bananas, and I made muffins, bread, butter, with all of that stuff.
You're gonna make me fat just talking.
So is it the same process basically for making any kind of butter from?
From making preserves,
6 to 8
basically, it's the same process. It's just
Okay.
it's ground up finer,
Okay.
and it's cooked down with your spices and stuff in it. Oh, and there's something when you're making jelly. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but I put about a tablespoon of jelly in my jelly when I'm making it, a tablespoon of butter, because that keeps it from foaming and you don't have to skim the foam off the top of the jelly when you get it made.
Butter?
Butter.
Butter makes everything better.
If you're cooking rice and it foams up,
Yeah.
put a little butter in it, it won't foam up.
You know, that makes sense. When I was
Yeah.
reading the instructions for my Instant Pot, it was saying if you want to make beans, add a little bit of olive oil, and it'll
So it's the
calm
fat.
down the foaming.
Yeah.
So it's the
Fat
fat.
layer.
And the butter doesn't hurt the taste of the jelly or the.
I mean, aren't you
Product.
gonna butter your bread first before you put the jelly on anyway?
Mm. So what's your apple butter recipe?
I said it's
Is
up
it-
here.
No, just what?
What?
Apples.
I chop the apples
Butter.
up and actually cook them down
Okay.
with sugar. I add
You cook them down in sugar.
yes,
Okay.
put a little water in your pot, your sugar, cook them all
Like
down.
a cup of sugar?
Huh?
A cup of sugar?
Depending on how much you got.
So let's say I had, I don't know, a half bushel of apples and I wanted to do apple butter with them.
You have to, and my way is to sweeten it to taste. Start
Okay.
out with a little bit and then add more.
Okay.
Depending on how much I have, as far as the product itself, that's going to depend on how much sugar I use. I start out with a little bit of spice. Your apple butter has usually got nutmeg or cinnamon, different spices in it. You'll have to look and see what you like.
Yeah.
You start out with a little bit and taste of it a little bit, and when it comes to the taste that you like, that's what you do.
Okay.
But you cook it down to where, and this is another one that you got to stay right there with it and keep it stirred, or it will stick to the bottom
Okay.
and burn. And I pour it up just like I do my other fruit products in the jar and put the lid on it, and it seals itself right out of the, I mean, while it's still hot, you want to bottle it or jar it. Most of my preserve recipes, I know the basics, but then I add what Gennie wants to add to it,
Sure.
according to what she feels like tastes right.
And I mean, with 50 years of experience, you kind of know at this point what everything takes. So
Yeah.
how do you go from a preserve to a butter though? So you do your
The
preserves.
preserves don't normally have the spices in them.
Ah,
Your apple butter, your banana butter are usually spiced with cinnamon and things like that.
so you don't have to puree it or anything. Just boil it like
But
it.
you do.
Oh, okay.
I don't necessarily puree it because I use my potato masher and I do it with that, which is a little more work on me. I could throw it in my blender, but I would have to be blending 2 and 3 different times to get the amount.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So,
So
it's
after you boil it, then you
after
mash
I cook
it.
it down till it's tender and getting really tender, I just take the masher and smash it all up.
Okay.
And
So you churn it and it turns into butter.
well, kind of. But no, it's everybody has their own way of doing that kind of stuff. It's just, to me, it would be a lot of work to be blending a little bit here and pouring it in the pot and then blending some more. I can go ahead and cook it down and get it done that way.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like cooking down your mashed potatoes and then mashing them up.
Gotcha.
So the banana butter is just mashed up bananas and spices cooked down?
With sugar and stuff.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. Pretty good with peanut butter and bread.
I was just thinking that. So heavenly.
Uh,
Do you make your own peanut butter?
I have, but I
Yeah?
don't. Number one, it's hard on the blender. I've made almond butter. It's hard on the blender. You have to blend a little bit and cut it off and let your blender rest and then blend a little bit more until it turns into a butter. And it will. It takes time. It's time consuming and it's
That's
rough
it.
on the blender.
Mm.
That's why they have special big blending bins that they make those stuff in with heavy motors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you go to this place, or is this your farm? Jack?
We go there.
You go. Okay.
Yeah. And I put the directions down on the paper so if you decide you want to go.
That's so sweet.
They were selling cantaloupes. Well, they got the prices. I downloaded the prices on there for you of what they have.
Thank you so much.
But to me, the tomatoes is the best buy. And if you pick your own and you have a 5-gallon bucket, you actually can wind up with more tomatoes of what you like. Because I like to I'll pick them from when they just start turning till they're full ripe. I bring them home and I lay them out on the table and I start working from the ripe ones as they get ripe. That means I don't have to can them all in one day.
Ah.
I'll buy some green ones from you.
Huh?
I'll buy some green ones from you.
If we go, we've talked about it, but we haven't gotten there yet. It's been too hot. Huh?
How far is it from here?
What do you say, about 50, 60 miles?
Something like that. It's just north of I-25. And,
I-10,
yeah, I-10.
and it's about, what,
Another few miles.
about 15, 20 miles east of Mariana?
Okay, it's a ways out there.
Is it
Greenwood,
no, Grand Ridge.
Grand Ridge.
Grand
That's where I
Ridge.
went to school.
Yeah, it's at Grand Ridge.
Okay. Any
But-
chance they also sell like raw milk?
No. There's a place in, I think it's in Bluntstown. that
That's
has
not
the
too
raw
far.
milk.
That's not too far at all.
Candace's Garden does. It's right down the road from your house.
Yep, it is.
It's the same
I would
thing
love to
that
hang
Garden
around,
does.
but I got to
Same
go.
company.
All right.
Oh, okay.
I gotta stop at the pig. before
What's
they
the name of the
close.
place?
We will miss you.
Candace's Garden,
Tanya's Garden.
or whatever the road to Lynn Hayden.
Okay.
Yeah. Between like where Coles is and
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Take care.
You heading out, William?
Hi, William.
Right,
Yeah.
I have to
do they
stop
ever
at the
do
pig.
strawberries?
I hear you. Well, thank you so much, Miss Jenny. This has been
Thank you much.
fantastic.
I hope I've helped you some.
Tremendously.
It's not as
Me,
hard
you have.
as some people make it out to be.
And that's what helped is you made it some very easy.
Doable.
Just a second.
Yes. Don't get carried away with what you're doing, and don't get overwhelmed. If you have a question, go to your internet. Search it out.
This was wonderful.
Sage advice. Thank you, Miss Jenny.
You're welcome.